The story follows a middle-aged woman who finds herself at a quiet but emotionally charged crossroads in her life. Beginning on an evening spent alone in a small, cramped motel room with her stepson, Gary. The setting itself immediately mirrors her internal state, confined, uncomfortable, and heavy with unspoken tension. As she sits there, the reality of her situation crashes over her with sudden clarity. Life, she reflects, has an unsettling habit of forcing people into moments they never anticipated. Her thoughts drift to her husband, Logan, who has been away in another city for months. While she genuinely misses him, she realizes that the ache she carries goes far beyond simple absence. What troubles her most is the emotional neglect she has endured, the lack of attention, intimacy, and meaningful connection that once defined their marriage. Over time, the loneliness has eroded her sense of self, leaving her vulnerable, restless, and quietly desperate for change. She never imagined that asking Gary to drive her to visit his father would lead to this moment. The two of them stranded together in a remote motel room with only one bed. The uncertainty of what comes next unsettles her, and she feels compelled to retrace the events of the day to understand how everything unfolded so quickly and unpredictably. The morning began like any other, yet an undercurrent of tension lingered as she prepared to leave the house. Catching her reflection in the mirror, she notices how strained she looks, but also recognizes that she still possesses a spark, an attractiveness and confidence that hasn't fully faded despite her emotional exhaustion. Logan's absence has made her feel exposed and alone, yet part of her still feels alive, aware that she is more than just a neglected wife. However, that awareness no longer satisfies her the way it once did. It feels fleeting, insufficient, and increasingly hollow. Meanwhile, Gary is in the kitchen finishing breakfast, unaware of the internal storm brewing inside her. She calls out to him, encouraging him to practice his driving skills and suggesting they visit his father together. Her tone is playful, but beneath it lies frustration and a quiet yearning for something to shift in her life. Gary responds with his characteristic mischievous grin and light-hearted sarcasm, joking about wanting a better car in exchange. Their exchange feels ordinary, almost familial, yet hints at the dynamic between them, his youthful energy contrasted with her simmering emotional fatigue. They set off on the road, and for a while the journey feels uneventful. She sits in the back seat, scrolling through her phone while Gary sings along to the radio, cracking jokes that amuse him more than anyone else. It is one of those mundane stretches of time where nothing seems remarkably until everything changes. Without warning, the car emits a harsh hissing sound and stalls completely, leaving them stranded in the middle of nowhere. Panic flickers in her chest, though she tries to remain calm. Gary pulls the car to the side of the road, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by irritation and disbelief. With little phone signal and no immediate help in sight, they spend hours attempting to solve the problem. They argue, call mechanics, and try every solution they can think of, but nothing works. As daylight fades, they are forced to accept reality. The car isn't going anywhere. Reluctantly, they find a nearby rundown motel and decide to spend the night. Standing at the front desk while Gary speaks to the receptionist, she feels frustration boil inside her. She worries about how Logan will react if he finds out about the situation, but to her own surprise, that concern feels muted. Instead, she senses without understanding why that this night will be significant. Something about it feels like a turning point, though its outcome remains unclear. When they enter the motel room, disappointment hits immediately. The space is small, dimly lit, and barely functional. There is only one bed, a single nightstand, and a flickering overhead light that casts everything in a dreary glow. The air conditioner barely works, and the window looks out onto the parking lot. Gary laughs off the conditions, joking that they aren't exactly at a luxury resort, but her irritation grows. Despite herself, she also notices how his relaxed attitude brings an odd sense of energy into the room, something she doesn't fully acknowledge or understand. Overwhelmed by the heat and stress, she decides to take a shower to clear her head. Alone in the bathroom, she stares at her reflection, noticing that despite everything her age, her exhaustion, her confusion, she still looks like herself. The shower's steam soothes her body, but not her mind. Thoughts collide as she reflects on her age, Gary's adulthood, and the strange reality of being trapped together in such close quarters. The situation unsettles her deeply, stirring emotions she struggles to define. She thinks of Logan, of her intention to surprise him, and of how far removed she now feels from that original plan. Later, hoping to regain some sense of normalcy, she goes downstairs to eat. The motel restaurant is modest but comforting. She orders a light meal and a glass of wine, hoping it will calm her nerves. As evening settles in and streetlights glow outside, her thoughts drift back to the room upstairs. She wonders how Gary is handling the confinement, imagining his restlessness and easygoing nature clashing with the stillness of the night. When she returns to the room, she is caught off guard by the scene before her. Gary is asleep on the bed, having showered, the room quiet except for his steady breathing. For a moment, she hesitates at the doorway, struck by an unexpected rush of conflicting emotions, discomfort, concern, and an awareness she doesn't want to examine too closely. The limited space leaves her with few options, and exhaustion eventually outweighs her anxiety. She settles onto the bed, telling herself repeatedly that it's only for one night, and that nothing about this situation means anything more than necessity. Sleep comes in fragments. At some point during the night, she wakes to movement and becomes aware of Gary shifting nearby. She keeps her eyes closed, pretending to remain half asleep while her thoughts race. The quiet tension in the room feels heavy, amplified by the closeness and the silence. When she finally opens her eyes, the moment feels charged with unspoken understanding, forcing both of them to confront emotions they have been avoiding. A conversation follows, careful, hesitant, and filled with uncertainty. Words are chosen slowly, weighed down by guilt, confusion, and honesty. Gary admits that the time spent together during Logan's absence has affected him more than he expected. She, in turn, acknowledges how deeply alone she has felt, how neglected and unseen she has become in her marriage. The exchange is less about desire and more about vulnerability to people recognizing emotional gaps they don't know how to fill. The night becomes a blur of exhaustion, emotion, and reflection rather than clear action. When morning arrives, reality returns abruptly. The car has been fixed, and the practical demands of the day reassert themselves. Gary informs her that they need to continue the journey and pick up Logan. Despite the emotional turmoil of the night before, there is an unspoken agreement to move forward. As they prepare to leave, she feels a complex mixture of relief, sadness, confusion, and anticipation. The experience has shaken her, forcing her to confront truths she had long ignored. She realizes that the breakdown was more than mechanical. It exposed fractures in her marriage, her identity, and her emotional resilience. By the time they are back on the road, she understands that nothing will ever feel quite the same again. The journey has become a catalyst for change, pushing her toward decisions she can no longer postpone. Though the future remains uncertain, one thing is clear. This moment, born from isolation and unexpected circumstance, has marked a turning point in her life. One she will carry with her long after the motel fades into memory.